Kira clutched her food tray tight against her chest, feeling her heart pound as she stepped into the massive dining hall. The place was huge, bigger than 3 football fields put together, with ceiling-high windows showing the stars outside. But right now, those twinkling lights felt cold and distant, just like everyone else in this room. Her blue skin glowed softly under the bright lights, and she knew everyone could see exactly what she was. A Lumine. One of the conquered species, as some kids liked to whisper behind her back. Her people had been peaceful farmers and artists before the Galactic Federation showed up and decided their planet needed protection. That was just a nice way of saying they took over everything and made the Lumine into second-class citizens. The dining hall buzzed with hundreds of conversations in dozens of different languages. Students from all over the galaxy sat together, but not really together. Each table was like its own little kingdom. The tall, proud Saurians with their golden scales sat at the biggest tables near the center. Their ancestors had conquered half the galaxy, so of course they got the best spots. The crystal-like resonance clinked softly as they communicated through musical tones, their table sparkling under the lights like a jewelry store display. Even the gaseous ethereals, floating in their special containment suits, had their own section where the air was pumped full of their preferred atmosphere. Everyone had their place, their group, their status. Everyone except species like hers. Kira took a deep breath and started walking. Maybe today would be different. Maybe someone would actually let her sit down without making her feel like garbage. She spotted an empty chair at a table of resonance and walked over hopefully. But as soon as they saw her coming, their musical chatter stopped. They turned away in perfect unison, their crystal bodies refracting the light in sharp, cold patterns. The message was clear: not welcome here. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she kept trying. The next table had some Verdani students, the plant-like beings who were usually pretty peaceful. Surely they wouldn't mind sharing space with a Lumine. But as she approached, their leafy arms stretched out to cover every empty seat, creating a living barrier. One of them looked at her with what might have been pity, but that somehow made it worse. "Sorry," the Verdani whispered in their rustling voice. "We're expecting friends." Kira nodded quickly and moved away, even though she could see no one else was coming to join them. The lie hurt more than outright rejection would have. She tried 3 more tables with the same result. The Aquarians bubbled disapprovingly in their water tanks. The Drakens, the reptilian warriors who served as the Federation's military backbone, didn't even bother being polite. They just hissed at her, showing their sharp teeth until she backed away. Even some of the smaller, quieter species turned their backs or suddenly became very interested in their food when she approached. With each rejection, Kira felt herself shrinking inside. The confident girl who had aced every test this semester was disappearing, replaced by the scared kid who remembered hiding in her family's basement while Federation ships circled overhead. Her bioluminescent patterns, which usually glowed bright blue when she was happy, had faded to a dim, sad purple. Finally, she spotted a tiny table in the far corner, squeezed between a waste recycling unit and the emergency exit. It was clearly meant for maintenance workers, not students, but right now it looked like paradise. At least there, no one could reject her. No one could make her feel small and unwanted with their looks and whispers. She sat down heavily, her tray making a loud clatter against the metal surface. The sound seemed to echo through the dining hall, and for a moment, even more eyes turned her way. Kira hunched her shoulders and stared down at her food, some kind of protein cube and vegetable paste that was supposed to be nutritionally complete for dozens of different species. It tasted like cardboard, but she forced herself to eat anyway. Around her, the normal sounds of the dining hall continued. Laughter from the Saurian tables. The musical conversations of the resonance. The bubbling debates of the Aquarians. Life going on as normal for everyone who belonged somewhere. Everyone except her. Jake had been sitting with the other human students when he noticed what was happening. The human section wasn't much to brag about, just a few tables shoved between the kitchen entrance and the janitor's closet. Earth had only joined the Galactic Federation 3 years ago, and everyone still treated humans like the new kids who might get kicked out of school at any moment. They didn't have fancy technology like the other species, no powerful military, and definitely no respect from anyone who mattered. But Jake couldn't stop watching the blue-skinned girl getting rejected over and over again. Every time someone turned her away, he felt his stomach twist up a little more. It reminded him of his first day at his old high school back on Earth, when he'd moved to a new town and didn't know anyone. The feeling of walking into that cafeteria alone, tray in hand, hoping someone would give him a chance. "Dude, stop staring," whispered Tyler, his roommate. Tyler was the kind of guy who always played it safe, never wanted to rock the boat. "You're gonna get us in trouble." Trouble for what? Looking at someone? Jake shot back, but he kept his voice low. The last thing the human students needed was to draw more negative attention. You know what I mean, Tyler hissed. Everyone's already watching us. Waiting for us to mess up so they can say we don't belong here. Don't give them a reason. Jake understood Tyler's fear. Just last week, a human student had been suspended for aggressive behavior, after arguing with a professor. The real story was that the professor, a stuck-up saurian, had called humans barely evolved primates during class. When the student stood up for himself, suddenly he was the problem. That's how it worked here. Humans were always wrong, even when they were right. But watching this girl sit alone at that tiny corner table, her blue skin glowing dimly like a dying light bulb, Jake couldn't just do nothing. She looked so small and defeated, picking at her food while trying to ignore the whispers and stares from around the room. Some of the Draken students were actually pointing at her now, making jokes in their clicking language that they probably thought she couldn't understand. This is stupid, Jake muttered, standing up and grabbing his tray. Jake, don't, Tyler pleaded. Think about what you're doing. She's Lumine. They're at the bottom of the food chain here. If you sit with her, everyone's gonna think we're losers too. We already are losers, according to them, Jake replied. So what's the difference? The truth was, Jake had never been good at staying quiet when something wasn't fair. Back on Earth, he'd gotten detention for standing up to bullies. He'd been kicked off the baseball team for arguing with the coach about playing favorites. His mom always said his mouth would get him in trouble someday, but she also said she was proud of him for standing up for what was right. As Jake walked across the dining hall, he could feel hundreds of eyes following him. Conversations started dying down, one table at a time, until the whole place was almost silent. His heart was beating so fast he thought everyone could probably hear it, but he kept walking anyway. The distance to that corner table felt like a mile. When he reached her table, the girl looked up with those big silver eyes, and he could see she was expecting another rejection. Her skin had turned an even darker shade of blue, which he guessed meant she was upset or scared. For a second, Jake almost lost his nerve. This was crazy. He was risking his own place at the academy for someone he'd never even talked to. But then he remembered something his dad used to say, being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared. Tough crowd, here? Jake said, trying to sound casual as he set his tray down across from her. The girl's eyes went wide with shock. She looked around like she was checking to see if this was some kind of joke, like maybe his friends were hiding somewhere ready to laugh at her. When she realized he was serious, her skin started glowing a little brighter. I'm Jake, he said, sitting down and opening his milk carton like this was the most normal thing in the world. Kira, she whispered back, her voice barely audible. We're in quantum physics together, right? Professor Zeth's class? That guy is brutal. I barely understood anything he said about dimensional folding yesterday. Jake kept talking, asking simple questions about homework and classes, pretending not to notice how quiet the dining hall had become. He could feel every alien in the place staring at them, but he just focused on Kira's face as her skin gradually shifted from dark blue to a warmer, brighter shade. That first lunch together turned into something neither Jake nor Kira expected. What started as a simple act of kindness became a real friendship, and then something even more powerful, a partnership that would change everything. At first, they just met during meals. Jake would save Kira a seat at what everyone started calling the misfit table in the corner. Other students still stared and whispered, but Jake had a way of making Kira laugh that made her forget about all the judgment around them. He'd tell her stories about Earth, about pizza and baseball and this thing called snow that fell from the sky. In return, Kira shared memories of her home planet, where cities grew like gardens and music came from the plants themselves. But it was during their study sessions that things got really interesting. Jake had always been decent at school, but he struggled with some of the advanced science classes. The math was just too complex, and the concepts seemed impossible to grasp. That's when Kira revealed something amazing about her people. We can see energy, she explained one evening as they worked on quantum mechanics homework in the library. Not just light energy, but all kinds. The way particles move, how forces connect things, even the electromagnetic fields around living beings. Jake stared at her. You're telling me you can literally see the stuff we're trying to learn about in physics class? Kira's skin glowed brighter, something Jake had learned meant she was excited or happy. It's why the Federation wanted our planet so badly. They use us as living sensors in their ships and research facilities. We can detect things their machines miss. That's incredible, Jake said. But also really messed up. They basically enslaved your entire species because of a natural gift. Enslaved is a strong word, Kira said quietly. They prefer strategic integration. The way she said it, with bitter sarcasm, made Jake realize she understood exactly what had happened to her people. Jake started sharing stories from Earth's history, about slavery, civil rights, and how humans had struggled with prejudice for centuries. He told her about people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks, individuals who had stood up against unfair systems even when it was dangerous. Your species fascinates me, Kira admitted. Lumine society was always peaceful. We never had conflicts like that. Maybe that's why we were so easy to conquer. Being peaceful doesn't make you weak, Jake said firmly. It makes you better than the people who took advantage of you. Their friendship started paying off in their classes too. Jake's natural curiosity and creative thinking combined perfectly with Kira's ability to literally see how energy and matter interacted. In Professor Zeth's quantum physics class, they started getting the highest scores on every assignment. Jake would come up with wild theories about how things might work, and Kira would confirm whether he was right by observing the actual energy patterns. Their chemistry professor, Dr. Vex, was amazed when they predicted molecular behaviors that his computer models couldn't calculate. Their engineering projects worked better than anything the advanced species were building. Word started spreading that the reject table was producing some of the most innovative work in the Academy's history. That's when they caught Thrak's attention. Thrak was everything Jake hated about the Academy's social structure. He was a Draken, one of the reptilian warrior species that served as the Federation's military backbone. His family had conquered dozens of planets, and he never let anyone forget it. Thrak was used to being the smartest, strongest, and most respected student in every room he entered. But now these two lesser species were making him look bad, and he didn't like it one bit. It started small. Whispers in the hallways about how humans and lumens were probably cheating. Comments during class about how primitive species shouldn't be allowed to use their unnatural advantages. Thrak had a way of saying things that sounded reasonable on the surface but carried a nasty undertone that everyone understood. I'm just saying, Thrak would announce loudly during study periods, some species have evolved special abilities that give them unfair advantages in academic settings. Perhaps there should be separate categories for testing, you know? To keep things fair for everyone. Other students started nodding along. The Saurians, who prided themselves on their intelligence, began grumbling about sensor species having advantages in physics classes. The Resonants, whose crystal bodies naturally processed certain types of mathematics, worried they'd be next to face accusations of unfair advantages. Jake could see what Thrak was really doing. He was turning their success into something dirty, making other students resent them instead of celebrating what they'd accomplished. It was a classic bully move: isolate your targets by making everyone else afraid they'll be associated with them. He's trying to tear us down because he's scared, Jake told Kira after a particularly bad day when 3 different professors had questioned their work. We're proving that his whole worldview is wrong. But Kira was starting to doubt herself. Maybe he's right. Maybe it's not fair that I can see things others can't. That's like saying it's not fair that birds can fly, Jake said. Everyone has different abilities. That's what makes working together so powerful. The harassment got worse every day. Thrak wasn't content with just spreading rumors anymore. He wanted to make Kira's life miserable. It started with accidents during lab sessions. Equipment would mysteriously malfunction when she used it. Her assignments would disappear from computer systems. Someone even put a dead plant in her locker with a note that said "for the energy leech." Jake tried to be there for her as much as possible, but he couldn't follow Kira everywhere. The academy was huge, with endless corridors and study rooms where anything could happen. He started worrying every time they separated after classes, wondering if she'd be okay walking back to her dorm alone. His worst fears came true on a Thursday evening. Kira had stayed late in the library working on a project while Jake attended a mandatory human-student meeting, one of those pointless sessions where they got lectured about maintaining Earth's reputation. When the meeting finally ended, Jake rushed to find her, but the library was empty except for a few study groups. He checked her dorm room, the cafeteria, even the medical bay. Nothing. Finally, he decided to search the academic wing, hoping she might still be in one of the classrooms. That's when he heard voices echoing from down a maintenance corridor, a part of the station most students avoided because it was poorly lit and smelled like recycled air filters. Jake recognized Thrak's voice immediately, that deep rumbling tone that always sounded like he was about to bite someone. There were at least 2 other voices with him, probably his usual crew of Draken followers who hung on his every word like he was some kind of war hero. You think you're so special, don't you, little glowworm? Thrak was saying. Walking around like you belong here, cheating your way through classes with your freaky energy tricks. Jake's heart started pounding as he crept closer, staying in the shadows. Through a gap in the corridor, he could see them. Thrak and two other Drakens had Kira cornered against the wall. She looked tiny next to them. They were each about 7 feet tall with thick scales and muscles built for combat. Her skin was flickering rapidly between blue and purple, which Jake had learned meant she was terrified. I'm not cheating, Kira said, but her voice was shaking. I just see things differently. Oh, you see things differently, mocked one of Thrak's friends, a Draken named Vex who always acted tough when Thrak was around. That's a nice way of saying you're a living cheat code. No wonder your pathetic species got conquered so easily. At least we didn't surrender like cowards, Thrak added, leaning closer to Kira. Your people didn't even try to fight back. Just rolled over and let the Federation walk all over you. Pathetic. Jake could see Kira's bioluminescence getting dimmer, like she was shutting down emotionally. This wasn't just bullying, this was psychological torture. They were attacking everything she was, trying to break her spirit completely. Here's what's going to happen, Thrak continued. You're going to stop showing off in class. Stop making the rest of us look bad with your sensor tricks. And if you don't, we'll make sure the professors know you're using unfair advantages. We'll get you kicked out of this academy so fast your glowing head will spin. And your little human pet too, added Vex. We're tired of both of you primitive species acting like you belong here. That was enough. Jake stepped out of the shadows, his hands shaking with anger but his voice surprisingly calm. Hey Thrak. Having fun picking on someone half your size? All three Drakens spun around, surprised. Thrak's eyes narrowed when he saw Jake, and he let out a low hiss that was meant to be intimidating. Well, well. Speak of the devil. Perfect timing, human. We were just discussing you. Jake walked forward slowly, placing himself directly between the Drakens and Kira. He wasn't stupid, he knew he couldn't win a physical fight against any of them, let alone all three. But sometimes the best weapon wasn't strength or size. Sometimes it was just being smarter than your opponent. Let me guess, Jake said, keeping his voice steady. You're upset because a couple of primitive species are making you look stupid in class. Must be embarrassing for such a superior life form. Thrak stepped forward, trying to use his height to intimidate Jake. Watch your mouth, monkey boy. You're in way over your head here. Am I? Jake smiled, and that seemed to confuse them. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like three big tough warriors are so threatened by one small girl that they had to gang up on her in a dark hallway. That doesn't seem very warrior-like to me. The grand challenge happened every year at the academy, but this time felt different. It was the biggest academic competition in the galaxy, where the smartest students from hundreds of species came together to solve real problems that stumped even the Federation's top scientists. Winners got scholarships, job offers from major corporations, and most importantly, respect that could last a lifetime. Jake knew this was their chance to prove everything. Not just that he and Kira belonged at the academy, but that the whole system of judging species by their military power or conquest history was completely wrong. The problem was, they needed a team, and nobody wanted to work with the problem students. We should just work alone, Kira said as they sat in their usual corner spot, watching other students form their groups. All around them, the superior species were clustering together. Saurians with Saurians, Resonants with other crystal beings, Drakens with their warrior buddies. Even some of the smaller species were trying to attach themselves to more prestigious groups, hoping to ride their coattails to success. No way, Jake said firmly. Look around this room. You see all those species sitting by themselves? The ones everyone ignores? They're not here by accident. They're smart enough to get into the most competitive academy in the galaxy. They just need someone to believe in them. Over the next few days, Jake did something nobody expected. He started recruiting. First was Zep, a small furry being from a species called the cat. They were known for being excellent engineers, but everyone thought they were too timid to be leaders. Then came Nova, whose people had been conquered so long ago that most students didn't even remember their original planet's name. She was brilliant at mathematics but had learned to hide her intelligence to avoid standing out. The last member was the biggest surprise of all, Finn, a human like Jake. But Finn was everything Jake wasn't: quiet, nervous, always trying to blend into the background. He'd been struggling in most of his classes, not because he wasn't smart, but because he was too afraid to speak up or show what he could do. This is insane, Finn whispered during their first team meeting. We're going to get destroyed. Look who we're competing against. He wasn't wrong. Thrak had assembled what everyone called the Dream Team, all Drakons and Saurians, species known for their advanced technology and military precision. Professor Zeth was practically grinning when he announced their team composition, like he was already engraving their names on the winner's trophy. The challenge itself was announced a week before the competition, detecting and mapping dangerous energy anomalies in the Kepler system, where solar flares and gravitational distortions made space travel nearly impossible. It was the kind of problem that had stumped Federation scientists for decades, and ships were being lost regularly trying to navigate through the area. Perfect, Thrak announced loudly, making sure everyone could hear him. A challenge that requires real technology and sophisticated analysis. Not parlor tricks and lucky guesses. Jake felt his team's confidence crash. This was exactly the kind of problem that favored species with advanced sensors and computing power. What could a group of lesser species possibly do against military-grade equipment and centuries of technological advancement? But that night, as Jake lay in his dorm room staring at the ceiling, he realized something. Every team was going to approach this the same way, throw more technology at the problem, build bigger sensors, run more complex calculations. What if there was a completely different approach? The next morning, he called an emergency team meeting. What if we're thinking about this all wrong? He said. Everyone's going to try to out-tech each other. But what if the solution isn't about having better technology? What if it's about understanding the problem differently? Kira's skin started glowing brighter. You mean use natural abilities instead of artificial senses? Exactly. Nova, your people have perfect mathematical intuition, right? You can see patterns in numbers that computers miss. Zep, the Ket built incredible machines for thousands of years before they even discovered electricity. Finn, humans are great at seeing connections that don't seem obvious. And Kira can literally see energy in ways no machine can replicate. For the first time since teams were announced, Finn looked excited instead of terrified. So instead of trying to beat them at their own game, we play a completely different game. Right. We use what makes each of us special, instead of trying to be something we're not. The week leading up to the competition was intense. While other teams worked with expensive equipment and ran countless simulations, Jake's group took a different approach. They studied the raw data from the Kepler system, but instead of relying on computer analysis, they used their natural abilities to find patterns that machines couldn't detect. Nova discovered mathematical relationships in the energy fluctuations that the computers had dismissed as random noise. Zep designed simple but elegant detection devices using principles that didn't require advanced technology. Finn, once he got over his fear of speaking up, proved to have an amazing ability to synthesize information from different sources and find connections nobody else saw. And Kira was the key to everything. Her ability to perceive energy patterns allowed her to see the data in ways that turn numbers and graphs into actual, visual information. She could point to a spot on their charts and say, "There's going to be a flare there in 6 hours," and she was always right. Competition day arrived, and the atmosphere in the main auditorium was electric. 12 teams had made it to the finals, each given 4 hours to present their solution to a panel of judges that included some of the most respected scientists in the galaxy. Team after team presented sophisticated technological solutions. Thrak's group had built a sensor array that looked like something from a science fiction movie, with holographic displays and AI-assisted analysis that made the audience gasp in appreciation. When it was their turn, Jake's team looked almost pathetic by comparison. Their presentation was simple, just charts and diagrams that Finn had drawn by hand, and a small device that Zep had built using basic materials from the engineering lab. But as they explained their solution, something magical happened. They showed how Nova's mathematical insights revealed a hidden pattern in the energy storms. How Zep's simple detector could predict anomalies hours before they formed. How Kira's energy perception had allowed them to map safe corridors through the dangerous zones that no computer model had ever identified. Most importantly, they showed that their solution actually worked better than any of the high-tech alternatives. The judges were stunned. Their detection method was 94% accurate compared to the next best solution 76%. It used a fraction of the resources, could be built quickly and cheaply, and most shocking of all, it had been developed by the team everyone had written off as hopeless underdogs. When the winners were announced and Jake's team took first place, the auditorium erupted. But the real victory came afterward, in the dining hall that night. For the first time since Jake had been at the academy, the rigid species segregation started to break down. Students from different backgrounds started sitting together, asking questions, sharing ideas. Kira, glowing with confidence and pride, found herself surrounded by younger students asking for advice and inspiration. Jake watched it all happen and smiled. Sometimes the biggest changes really did start with the smallest actions. All it had taken was one person willing to move his tray to a different table and say, "Tough crowd, huh?" Retry. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.